Thank. Let's see, anybody else?
Robert could have turned that on.
Okay, well, she'll maybe now she'll let them know. All right. It opened 1850. Now remember, it was 1803 that the Lodging was open. You know, so not too. Oh, you made a few extra copies? Good, excellent. Yes, thank you very much. All right. And it was open. This is interesting. You know, very often it's founded by a Rav, you know, a great Rav that had the idea. This was opened in 1850 by a leading scholar of the community. But he was a layman. You know, he wasn't an active Rav. He wasn't the Rav of the town or anything. And his name was Shmuel Tikatinsky. I don't know. I looked him up. I just found out he died in 1835. So, you know, I don't have his full dates. For the first 8 years of the yeshiva, he supported the yeshiva single-handedly. He obviously was a wealthy man, but he could do this. His son Abraham, again, I fucked out the V, soon joined his father's head of the yeshiva. Meir gradually gained popularity and stature. By 1840, it numbered 100 students, which is fairly substantial, but the Luzhin was much larger. Okay. In 1835, both Shmuel and Rav Avram Katinsky died. So isn't that interesting that the father and the son, again, I don't know that it could have been, you know, very often there were different plagues and things, you know, people passed away. Rav Yosef David Mir, the rabbi of Mir, then assumed the leadership. So most towns would have obviously a Rav of the town, but if there was a yeshiva there was also a Rosh Yeshiva. Now, sometimes they became the one same person would have both roles. Okay, he's being elusive. But in 1850, Chaim led Titsky, and I do have his dates, 1823, 1899, who was the grandson of the founder, and his grandfather's father had already passed away. Turned to Mir, obviously he had been living elsewhere, and became the leading educator in the yeshiva. Rav Chaim Leib was an outstanding teacher, and under his leadership, Mir established itself, I think I should add that, itself firmly as a leading yeshiva, second only to the Luzhin in numbers and reputation. Rav Chaim Leib died in 1891, so we're coming to the very end of the 19th century, leaving his son Abraham as head of Mir. Abraham immediately began to search for a charismatic figure who could inspire and expand the yeshiva, just like we talked about the Luzhin, how Rabbi Talmud was brought in, because they wanted another figure that would attract guys to come to that yeshiva. At that time, at the same time, Rav Eliyahu David Rabinowitz Tumim left the post of the rabbi of Mir to emigrate to Yerushalayim. Thus, so now it's going to be 2 openings in the city of Mir. The possibility of finding one person to head both the community and the yeshiva arose. That person was Rav Eliyahu Baruch Chamai. He born 1840, dies 1917. He served both as the rabbi of Mir. There are papers there, and now and now he joined Rav Avram as head of the yeshiva. It was under Rav Chamai that Mir became the leading yeshiva of Lithuania. Well, remember, don't forget that Volozhin was closed down, because of the interference of the government. It's like that. It was like a bee in the bonnet of the Russian authorities. They wanted, in Volozhin to introduce all sorts of secular subjects. They wanted to limit the hours that the guys could sit and learn. And eventually it was just closed down. So again, it also now grows in numbers and stature. Before World War I, it had a student population of almost 250 young men. So still not quite as large as Volozhin had been, but meanwhile, you'll see there are other yeshivas that will have opened up, in this period. It produced many great rabbinic leaders and was strongly influential on Jewish life in Lithuania and I suppose you do know the story of what happened to the new yeshiva. Obviously, it was in Lithuania. First, the Soviets came in. They wanted to close down all the yeshivas. So there was actually a small window of opportunity. From the time that the Soviets were ruling over Lithuania till the Nazis invaded, which is 1941, right? And so, some of it, thank God that they had the vision, to know to leave. I think they first go to Siberia, if I'm not mistaken, and then they eventually find their way all the way to Japan. First go to Kobe, Japan. First they're in Japan. And I presume that Sukihara, the Japanese consul who wrote out all these visas, he probably issued a lot of the visas for these men to leave, young men. And I told you my Zeta was influential in this move near out of Lithuania for them to escape. They get to Kobe, Japan. They don't stay in Kobe, Japan a long time, but the Japanese authorities at this point, they have already overrun China. And so they send them to live in Shanghai. And Shanghai was a big hub of Jews. There are a lot of German and Austrian Jews who were, again, before the Nazis clamped down on them, who, initially a lot would have left perhaps and came to either to Israel or to the United States. But then when, this became impossible, so that's why they were able to, then they got these visas to go to Shanghai. Shanghai at that point was an open port and welcomed them in. They really lived in horrible conditions there. And these roach infested little flats, but they survived, exactly. And after, when the war ended, so gradually the Mir Yeshiva, the students, were brought, I think first to the United States. Again, I think it was through my visit.
South Africa.
Well, maybe they had some there. But the more famous yeshivas, were the ones in New York, and then eventually in Eretz Israel, in Yerusha, Leiden. So I just wanted to sort of tell you a little. I didn't write it all down, but just so you know what happened to this. A lot of the other yeshivas and their students, of this. Right. Once the Nazis came in, it became almost impossible to get people out. And then they started murdering already. And I think I might have mentioned this in the past, 95% of Lithuanian Jews were murdered. I mean, that's huge. I remember reading a lovely children's book. I mean, it was almost like a memoir, but it was considered, young adult literature. And I'm trying to think of the name of the author. She grew up in Vilna. And she described, her father had some sort of a little, like a children's coat factory or something. So when the Soviet Union initially took over Lithuania, so they started deporting a lot of these people to Siberia. And she remembers being on the train, leaving the train station in Vilna, and saying goodbye. And all, other friends or relatives had come to the train station. Everyone's crying, and their focus then was, what's going to happen to them in Siberia? And the end result was they survived, but those who were left behind, were caught up and all murdered by the Nazis. So let us go on. So now we're going to talk about Slobodka, but I want to take a break before I discuss Slobodka. Take the sheets that I just now handed out, the one about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. We're going to talk about him in the Musar movement, because this Musar movement had a profound impact on some of the major yeshivas. I asked my son, he was visiting, there was a rabbinic conference here, Rabbi Gibershul, and I said, well, what was it like a YU? Did you have Musar? He said there would be maybe and maybe it was like in the evening learning session, I don't know, that there would be maybe 20 minutes devoted to Musser, and depending on what other Rabbanim, would come in and lead this discussion, with the boys. I thought I went to the girls' high school. I told you I learned Musser, right, which is ethics. That's basically what it is, ethics, or a moral code. I sort of just by learning text, observing teachers, how people conducted themselves. I didn't need to have it like taught to me as a formal, body of work. But apparently in the yeshiva world, depending on the yeshiva, that was important. And now we're going to learn about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter and why he came up with this methodology and introduced it into various yeshivas. Okay, so this is his official name, Rabbi Yisrael Lipkin of Salant. Again, it's a small town, somewhere near Vilna. His years are 1810 to 1883. He was a towering Lithuanian Rav, who is known right as Rav Yisrael Salanter. He was the father of the Musser movement, which continues to exert a significant influence upon the Torah community till this very day. Rabbi Yisrael's family was descended from the Vilna Gaon. I don't know the exact relationship, but he was descended from the Vilna Gaon. And during the early years of his life, Rabbi Yisrael studied with his father. His name was Rav Ze'ev Wolf, a great scholar in his own right. So he didn't go to yeshiva as a child. His father would have taught him. I think my Zeta was the same thing because he grew up in a little town called Dusat, which is outside of Kovno. And his early years, right, he learned with my great Zeta. I'm actually my name is Malka. I am named after that my Zeta's mother. Because there's a book about my Zeta, Rabbi Rakepet wrote it. It's called The Silver Era. And in it, it's talking about a Malka Silver. I'm like, whoa, that's me. You know what? I mean, that was my great grandmother's name. When he was 10 years old, his father sent him to study the towns of Salant. So that's why he's associated with that town. Right, where he studied under Rav Tzvi Hirsch Broida, who was one of the most outstanding Torah scholars of his generation. Rav Broida quickly recognized that the boy was a singularly gifted student. He spent a great deal of time teaching him privately. And I know this for my Zeta is a very similar thing. I don't think he ever learned in some of these major yeshivas, but some of his rabbeim wore some of the great Russian yeshiva, but they taught him privately. I think there were like 3 guys. I don't know. I have to read it off in the book again. I don't remember, but and so he was taught privately. Rav Brode, Yisrael, I'm sorry, remained in Salon for approximately 18 years. So he came there, he's 10, he's now 28 years old, all right? During which time he studied Torah with phenomenal diligence. When he was still only a young man, he had already acquired a reputation as one of the outstanding scholars of his generation. Now, at a certain point, he does get married, and he has numerous, children. I didn't include it in this, but just know that is what happened. In 1848, a cholera epidemic swept Vilna, and I believe cholera comes from contaminated water supply. Right. That cholera was a problem in the walled city of Yerushalayim.
Too. They did the swamps.
Yeah.
They cleared the swamps. A lot of people got sick.
Right. That was in the north more, the Fula Valley.
Yes.
We're talking about, right. Did you ever go in Yerushalayim? I found it so interesting. I never had paid attention. It's called Sharei Chesed. I believe that's the neighborhood where you can see these old cisterns where people would go and with their buckets, but I guess cholera was a way the cholera spread. So at a certain point, especially in the British Mandate, they closed them off, they sealed them, and then they had pipes and everything, to bring in fresh water. a lot of the water was actually came all the way from Hebron. And I once read this, and it was like a very gradual slope. But that's how the water came into Jerusalem. Okay, so when this cholera epidemic occurred in 1848, Rabbi Yisrael stood at the head of relief activities, disregarding the personal hazards involved. He insisted that Jews engaged in work on Shabbos to help aid the ill, and that they should not rely on the non-Jewish population to do so. Interesting, right? On Yom Kippur of the same year, he instructed all Jews to eat during, right?
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that very novel? But he felt it was so important they had to keep up their strength, so they were important that they should eat. He himself recited Kiddush loudly in his shul, and he ate publicly to set an example for the entire congregation. So this man was a real community raw, not just this brilliant scholar, but he was concerned about the welfare, of the people of his town. During the course of his years in Salon, Rabbi Yisrael established close ties with Rabbi Yosef Zundel of Salon in his year 1786, a little bit older man, to 1866. Rav Zundel exerted a remarkably far-reaching influence upon the young scholar, an influence which would drastically alter the entire future course of his life. It was through Rav Zundel's guidance and inspiration that Rabbi Yisrael began to critically examine the many phases of the religious life pattern of the contemporary Jewish man. So look, he sees all these people, they're following halacha, they're doing a lot of it, perhaps by rote. So he wants to add an extra spiritual dimension to their observance, of mitzvot. Rabbi Salanter found many aspects of this life, the current life of how Jews were conducting themselves to be lacking in many respects. He then began to reevaluate his own perspective concerning the life goal of a Torah Jew. He began to dedicate his life to seeking out and introducing a new dimension into the Torah Jew's service of Hashem, the Creator. This dimension would then be instrumental in bringing the Jew ever closer to an attainment of these goals. In other words, he's going to introduce the study of Musar as a discipline, as a way of appreciating halacha and the observance of mitzvahs, and to bringing it up to a higher spiritual level. Rav Zundel was a disciple of Rav Chaim Volozhin, from whom he derived direction, inspiration, and guidance. He was an exceedingly great Torah scholar, according to his son-in-law, who was Rabbi Shmuel Salant, who later became head of the religious community of Yerushalayim. Rav Zundel was numbered among the greatest scholars of his generation. However, it was in his spiritual and ethical stature that he was entirely unique, towering far above his contemporaries. Rav Zundel was permeated with an unquenchable yearning to attain spiritual wholeness or perfection in the service of Hashem. So, not just to, that you're observing all the halachas, you're doing everything right and proper, but you want to make it, put you on a spiritual high through, the observance of mitzvot. He strove ceaselessly to perfect his midos, the character traits, and his fear of God, to refine his ethical sensitivities, to improve upon his character traits, and to reinforce through the study of Musar his own awareness of his responsibilities as a Torah Jew. Now, he's getting, this philosophy, this idea from former Sforim that have been written about. As we progress, I'll mention them. So it wasn't like a totally innovative thing, but what's innovative with him is that he's now going to stress how important it is and it should be part of a yeshiva curriculum. Not just sitting there and studying Gemara, day after day, and pointing out all the fine minutia, different arguments. But let's raise this to a spiritual level. Rabbi Yisrael, as a result, oh no, the next paragraph now, right? Okay. During the many years that Rabbi Yisrael studied under Rav Zundel, their close relationship led to Rabbi Yisrael's gaining a profound insight into the fundamental components of the Musar philosophy. He gained a deep appreciation of its significance as an instrument for the attainment of an individual's spiritual enrichment. I remember reading this in one of my sources. In the Hasidic world, there's great spirituality, and a great excitement, of Avodas Hashem, the worship of God. So it's sort of like, you'll see, because this Muslim movement is actually incorporating some of the ideas from the Hasidim, but obviously this is a Misnagdish world, we're talking about these yeshivas, but to incorporate, that was the reason, part of the reason why the Hasidic movement came into being, because I felt, in most of the Misnagdish yeshivas, very, they felt, was very dry, big stress on the attainment of, brilliant scholarship, and, was leaving behind the masses of the people. So the Hasidic, starting with Baal Shem Tov and later, are putting the emphasis on the joy that's to be found, right, in the worship of Hashem. So I feel like with this Rav Zundel and then later Rabbi Salanter, it's not a question of incorporating joy, but again, that you should be on a spiritual high as a result of being an observant Jew or a student, right, in the yeshiva. Where he felt it was an instrument for the attainment of an individual's spiritual enrichment. As a result, Rabbi Yisrael came to regard Rabbi Zundel as a Rav Mubhat, which means his primary teacher. Most, you have many teachers over the course of one's life, but there might be a particular individual that you follow particularly. So that means that's a Rav Mubhat. Rabbi Yisrael later became the foremost exponent of the Musar philosophy. It was through his tireless efforts and dedication that the Musar approach took on the character of a widespread movement. So now it's not enough just to sit and study Torah and the Gemara and all the portion, the Shulchan Aruch and its ramifications, but you have to introduce some sort of an ethical, concept into our Torah learning. Rabbi Yisrael later became the foremost exponent of this philosophy. It was through his tireless efforts and dedication Musar approach took on the character of a widespread movement. This movement brought a new dimension of soul-searching sincerity and vitality into the study halls of the Lithuanian yeshivas. Rabbi Yisrael traveled from city to city in an effort. I guess he was a very charismatic person, a very great orator, be able to influence people, in an effort to bring the message of Musar to the European Torah community. Wherever he went, he found a receptive audience. He gained a widespread reputation as a brilliant Torah scholar, an outstanding Baal Midos. In other words, he himself was a highly moral and ethical individual, an ethical personality par excellence. He founded numerous Musar study groups. So before it even becomes incorporated as sort of an official study component within the yeshiva, there would have been separate groups of people who would just get together to study Musar. He inspired large audiences with his eloquent speeches. He influenced many Jews to embark upon a conscientious plan of self-improvement through the study of Musar. He also introduced the idea of setting aside, this is interesting, I'm not sure where he meant this, in your house, I don't know, but you should have a secluded room where you're going to go and sit there and concentrate, to be used for intensive Musar study and an atmosphere of sincere introspection. Right, you do have to have quiet sometimes to really concentrate. You want to improve yourself, your spirituality. So, you have to sort of cut yourself off, from the world around you. In his magnum opus, that means his main sefer, Igeret HaMusar, Rabbi Salanter defines the fundamental principles upon which the study of Musar is based. While man prides himself in being a completely rational creature, his decisions and his behavior are often a product of his vivid imagination and his emotions. So, like, you want to achieve a high level, let's say a Torah observance, but man is weak. You're influenced by outside, sources, and also just within yourself, your hara can lead you off the proper derech. Okay. And he's saying that so the emotional component of a man can be stronger than his intellectual, capacity. Man's imagination can lead him wildly in the direction of his heart's desire. I mean, this is not the Sivir and the Shema that we recite every day. The Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, will frequently have a devastating influence upon his behavior. To override the emotional allure of the imagination, the diligent and intense study of Musar can create a counterforce of positive emotions. All right. So if he's sort of viewing it as like a counterweight, to if he was like, I'm being unduly influenced, by outside sources, it's going to affect you personally. So, but if you study Musar, it will raise you to a higher level. On the intellectual level, the Musar program may take on the form of Musar lectures. Again, I told you in many yeshivas, this is part of it, such as those Rabbi Yisrael introduced into his own yeshiva. In addition, now this is what I talk about, the fact that there were sforim on this subject written before. The great classical works of Musar should also be studied, such as Lavavot, still studied, today, and that's Rabbeinu Bachya Ibn Pekuda, that's around the year 1080. Sharei Teshuva, which is Rabbi Yonah Durandi from the 13th century, or Chod Tzadikim, which is, there's no one particular author who wrote this, but it comes out of 15th century Germany from the Hasidei Ashkenaz. There's a group here. And this last one, which again is studied, Mesilat Yesharim. And that was written by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, known as the Ramchal. And that his dates are there are 1707, 1746. So getting closer to the 19th century, the 18th century. Through these study sessions, the student will learn to recognize Torah learning is a continuous growth process. Torah fulfillment must be a reflection of the individual's incessant aspiration to achieve shleimut, shalem, completeness, wholeness, a divinely appointed task. So, do not just study halacha for, basing everything just on the text and it felt like that was too dry an approach. You had to also, introduce in part of your learning and your spiritual development a stress on Musar. And a lot of it would have been based on these former sforim that have been written and are still studied to this day. Through these study sessions, right, so it would be like a continual growth. That you're growing intellectually, you're also growing spiritually. Right, Torah fulfillment must be reflection, right, achieve shleimut, right, completeness, a divinely important task. Okay, on the emotional level, so notice the intellectual thing would be that you would be studying various forums, listening to lectures on this. On the emotional level, Rabbi Salanter posits the individual should pursue a course of critical self-analysis, or you have to constantly be aware of your own limitations, right? And seek to improve them, on a continual basis. One should concentrate upon his individual character flaws or weaknesses in an effort to correct them, to improve upon them. The words of the sages should be studied repetitively with intense concentration until one's intellectual convictions will be firmly entrenched within one's conscience. The more you study, the more you absorb it, it becomes part of yourself. This will serve as an emotional counter force to offset the tides of passion and temptation, in other words, the Yetzer Hara, which stand poised to ensnare and engulf the self. Now you have to understand, this is the same time period as the growth of Haskalah and the growth, not in Eastern Europe, but they do know about the growth of the Reform movement. So it's like, a Jewish scholar must be cognizant of these outside forces that are trying to taint his soul, so to speak, and he has to constantly work against it. He has to constantly trying to improve himself. The success of the Muslim movement was due in large measure to the fact that Rabbi Salanter had many great students who carried on his work after him with single-minded determination. Among them was Rabbi Yitzhak Glazer of it's actually St. Petersburg, 1837, 1907, who collected and published the correspondence of Rabbi Salanter in a sefer called Or Yisrael, the light of Israel. Rabbi Glazer also headed the Kovna Kollel, which was the forerunner of the Musar type yeshivas prevalent throughout Lithuania. Another Rabbi Salanter's disciples were Rabbi Simcha Zisselbroida, I know his relative, right? The other Rav Broida, 1824 to 1898, known as the Altar of Kelm. Right? Altar means the older, this person you look up to, and Kelm was a town. Some of the great Musar yeshivas, such as Slobodka, which we're about to study, Mir, so apparently Mir was also considered, and Telz, which flourished in Europe, continue to carry on this great legacy, both in Israel and the United States. And I told you, my kids went to YU. My father also, although it wasn't YU then, just Rabbi Yitzhak was an inspector. That's REITs, they were in a division. But apparently, that because I told you, I just asked my son the other day, did you have official Musar lectures? And he said, yeah, but it was like 20 minutes. I mean, it wasn't like a major part of the curriculum. And I think he said it would have been like in the evening in the base medrash, different Rabbanim would take turns to lecture about this. Okay, so now we already did Mir, so now based on this, that it was, apparently also a follower of this Musar movement. Now let's do Slobodka, also a very, very well-known and prominent yeshiva. One of the largest and most influential yeshivas in Lithuania. So now I went to this, the one from last week, which says the yeshiva movement expands. And the first one that we talked about was Mir. I told you Mir was the one who ended up going to Shanghai and eventually the US and Israel. What's that? Oh. He really puts it in very well.
I heard you, get organized.
Yeah. Some people, I'm a highly organized person. You come to my house, everything's Sudat. So someone asked me once, I ate yeki. I said, no, not at all. But my mother, who her parents were from Poland, but I learned this from my mother, you opened up her living closet, everything was folded neatly, as is mine, right? I don't like chaos. It actually literally bothers me. I was a school librarian for many years. I would not leave until everything was put away. When I'm back in the morning, because kids keep on thumping, books and things. I couldn't start working on that day's task, until I put everything back in order.
It's nice of you.
Yeah. And then my husband always said, I can't find this. I go right over to the desk
That's right. You know everything that-
But instead of getting all flustered and bent out of shape, just remember where you put things, or my husband will just leave things lying around, it drives me crazy. All right, back to Slobodka. Yes, three,
If not, it's very good.
right. Okay, so again, this was after Volozhin, this is considered to be the greatest yeshiva, at this time. That was the same, it was called, official name is Yeshiva Knesset Yisrael, which was in Slobodka, and I'll tell you that's Kovno. Okay, that's where it was located. It was founded in 1863.
Wait, are
As
you
a-
reading? So Dr. Emil?
I'm at the very bottom where it says Slobodka.
You're in the page.
Good. Yeah, so now I'm on
You're
another
in the
page two. Okay. It was founded in 1863 as a small yeshiva in a suburb of Kovno called Slobodka, right? And the name of the Rav who helped found it. This is Rav Tzvi Levitan from 1840 to 1915. And by 1877, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, his name I remember hearing people talking about. His dates are 1849 to 1927, so we're going into the 20th century. He joined Rav Levitan as the leader of the yeshiva. At this time, Rav Finkel, joined by other rabbanim, founded the Kovner Kollel for advanced Talmudic studies. So, these were where, and I know, like my brother, for example, where you get Yodin when you get Tznicha. But he went on to Rabbi Green, what's the next level?
Yeah.
Oh, Yodin is the
Yeah,
higher
yeah.
level, right? So, oh, that's it, okay. The influence of the Kollel, I mean, I know at YU now they have a Kollel Elyon, which also, it's continue the studies on a higher level. Okay, found the Kollel. The influence of the Kollel was great. The community saw the need now, all right, with increased appreciation for the importance of Talmudic scholarship. The community saw the need for a larger yeshiva. In response to this perception and the efforts of Rav Finkel, the Yeshiva's Knesset Yisrael came into being. Okay. In 1889, we're at the getting the last years of the 19th century, Rav Yitzhak Yaakov Rabinowitz came to the yeshiva, and under his Talmudic genius, it flourished. He often was compared to the great Rav Chaim Soloveitchik of Volozhin. In 1890, Rav Dov Heller became the mashgiach of the yeshiva. I'm trying to understand the position of the mashgiach. He's supposed to interact more with the students, right?
He is the spiritual advisor.
Ah, okay, all right. Because I remember my husband talking about, I think in his day, it might have been Rav Zach. I'm trying to remember what he told me. We're going to learn about Rav Zach as we progress here. Because he was a European Rav. I mean, YU has so changed over the years. Obviously, my Father's Day and my husband's day too. So many of the Rabbanim were Europeans, have been brought over. But now it's all these American or Israeli, Rabbanim, who usually. I mean, I think they relate better to the students. So it makes more sense. Okay, in 1890, Rav Dov Heller became the mashgiach, right? And in 1894, two brothers-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Mordechai Epstein, have his dates 1866 to 1933, and Isser Zalman Meltzer, 1870, 1953. I was a little girl. Joined the faculty of Slobodka.
So he saw World War I and World War II.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, or post-World War II, right? These two great scholars, both products of Volozhin, helped Slobodka achieve new heights in popularity and recognition. And then again, because Volozhin will come to an end, will no longer exist. So now this will become the preeminent yeshiva, Slobodka. Oh, did he? All right, very good, excellent.
Together with our Kahneman,
Ah,
Popovich.
a part of it, yeah.
Yeah, the-
I remember going to B'nai Brak, that's what part of his yeshiva is.
yeah.
And my father, my Zeta was friends with Rav Kahneman. But I remember my father, I don't remember Rav Kahneman was still living. This is in the 1960s. My first trip to Israel was 1963. Anyway, so my father wanted to go to yeshiva. I mean, only he was allowed inside. So I stayed outside with my mother and my younger brother. But it's so funny. My father, as soon as he would be in the yeshiva environment, he would revert to Yiddish. I mean, he knew Hebrew, but somehow this was like a comfort language. Right, to speak in Yiddish.
And also when we went to South Africa to collect money and
Yes.
all over the world, we spoke in Yiddish.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's the-
That was the common language among Jews all over the world. I mean, now it's not, like that anymore. I don't know Yiddish,
You don't? No.
No, my parents spoke, remember, American, we spoke English in the house. And I didn't live near my grandparents. And one set of grandparents, I told you grandma was born in the United States. My Zeta came from Europe. He always had an accent. I think he was 13 years old. On my father's side, they were speaking Yiddish, but my grandma on that side passed away. My mother had never met him. She died in her 50s. And my Zeta would come to visit. So he and my father were speaking Yiddish the whole time. Knew till I was. Oh, do you have any stories to tell about your Zeta? Because a lot of stories floating around about him. I really have nothing to contribute. I just remember he had very twinkling blue eyes. I do remember that. And he always had a smile on his face. Yeah. So, but I didn't really communicate with him. And his second wife, again, I don't know her origin, but she spoke English fine. Too. Obviously, spent many years growing up in America. Okay. What did I say? We talked about the scholars from Slovakia. That came from Bologna. That it says eventually, I think I'm in the middle of that paragraph. All of the above scholars left Slovakia. They're going to go to other places, except for Rav Nosson Steve Finkel and Rav Moshe Mordechai Epstein. These two built Slovakia into the major Musar, again, under the influence, right, of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Major Musar Yeshiva of Lithuania, and into the major producer of rabbis, teachers, and religious leaders of the 20th century. Rabbi Finkel, known as the Alter, again, the older, of Slovakia, had tremendous insight into his students, and they in turn revered and loved him. So it's a beautiful relationship, like with the Rebbe and his students. Most of the great figures in the post-war American yeshiva world were molded by the Alter. The yeshiva continued to function throughout the First World War, though it was temporarily exiled from its home in Slovakia. I mean, when and they didn't do anything to attack the Jews specifically, but when the German forces, invaded, I mean, it was just a tremendous upheaval, and actually what happened after the revolution in Russia, 1917, then you go through a period of tremendous civil war between the whites and the reds, and there was awful famine in Russia those days. And we're going to learn about the pogroms in the 1880s, but there were apparently horrible pogroms in those early 1920s. I remember my year in Israel. I rented a room from Lady and it was actually Tel Aviv, but close to the Rehavi border in Yerushalayim. And she described to me, she remembers her brothers being attacked and coming home, all bloody, because, again, I don't even remember exactly where she came from. Anybody know anybody from Malka Morris? She was the mashkiach in the kitchen, in America's Haran. Any case, brings back different memories as we're progressing. Let's finish this up. Okay, so let's just finish. We'll do the next paragraph. We'll finish up about Slobodka. A second large yeshiva was founded in Slobodka in 1897, and it was called Knesset Beis Yitzchak, in memory of the famed Rabbi Yitzchak Hanan Spector. And that's why you Reitz, is named after him. All right. 1817 to 1896, and he was the Rav of Kovno. It was a competitor of Yeshiva Knesset Yisrael, and that it was explicitly a non-Musar yeshiva. So they didn't like that idea that, you need to spend time just on Musar. Rabbi Chaya was his first head, but he left in 1904. He was then replaced by one of the central figures of the yeshiva, Rav Baruch Ber Leibowitz. I remember hearing about him. 1862 to 1939. Rabbi Leibowitz was the premier disciple of Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik and was one of the leading Talmudists of his time. Rav Baruch Ber headed the yeshiva in Slobodka until World War I, when it was forced to disband. I told you, there was tremendous upheaval going on in Eastern Europe. He reestablished it initially in Russia, all right? Because don't forget, there's no longer this Pale of Settlement anymore after this time period. Most of these parts of Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, they all become part of Russia, all right? And finally, after the war, he went to Kamenets, Poland. He was also known, he was very famous, where thereafter became known as Yeshiva Kamenets. All right, so I'm sure you might have heard of it. So next time we'll do Rodin, and that's the Chafetz Chaim. And I think, all should be good. So, and Mir Hashem, I know, Rabbi Green, you are leaving, but the rest of you hopefully will still be here. And I'm going to teach till the end of March, but then, that will be it because it's too hard for me. Yeah, my daughter's invading me with her.
Where is she from?
She's from Marine Park,
Oh,
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
I have family in East PM 33rd, next to Rabbi Walker.
And where is this?
Marine Park.
In Marine Park? I don't know, there's so many rabbi. My son-in-law goes to Rav Twersky. You think I know these things?
Can we be allowed to vote about you going to New York and not keeping teaching us? And be allowed to vote?
I already went to New York. I made sure to be back by today. I came back Tuesday afternoon. I was so exhausted yesterday. Oh my God. My great pleasure. Everybody should be well. Oh, I didn't see you before, Paul. Okay. I'll see you every time. Right, no problem. Rabbi Green, what day do you leave, Eretz Yisrael? Oh, so you're living out of Fort Lauderdale? Yeah, very nice. I'm so glad they finally have El Al now coming. I used to hate going to Miami. Oh, awful.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
So when are you gonna be here? Go ahead, tell us.
No, I'll be here through the end of March. Just not the beginning of April, because then it's Pesach already. I can roll up things.
And then you stop at this, no more.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you guys want to somehow request it, I don't mind teaching beyond Pesach. But usually they tell me they just have classes for in the season here.
Right.
So,
Not far.
oh, she's got her jacket. Oh, my cousin was here. Okay. I see my cousin did join in. Bye. Chazy.